Now very much on your match of the day screens. A really interesting conversation coming your way with Danny. 53106, the text number. We're at Off the Ball on Twitter. Richie McCormack, good evening.
Hey, Joe.
Nathan Murphy, hello.
Hey, Joe.
So it's the eve of the big one, Nathan. Stephen Kenny has 8 games in a bid to make World Cup 2022. If we can be presumptuous enough to say the 2 against Luxembourg will hopefully be 6 points. The 2 against Portugal are shots to nothing and may very well be important. Azerbaijan is about not slipping up. And then the 2 against Serbia, they are most certainly the big 6-pointers. So it is a high-stake start.
It sure is. And Stephen Kenny mentioned this in his press conference last week about an 8-game campaign, how if you can get some positive early momentum, how beneficial it is to you, but also what it takes away from the opposition. That if Ireland could go and get a result tomorrow night, and then if Serbia were to lose to Portugal, suddenly that game against Azerbaijan next week, remember they've 3 games in a row, 3 difficult enough games, that suddenly nearly half their campaign is gone, Serbia, and they've no momentum at all heading into the summer. So that's the dynamic that's at stake. But Ireland need to get something tomorrow night, because the flip of that is, while we're presuming against Luxembourg are getting better. And if Ireland don't win tomorrow night, or if they were to lose tomorrow night, we're talking about a side whose confidence you'd have to feel is going to be at a really low place in an empty Aviva Stadium late on the Saturday evening is not where you want to be playing Luxembourg. And Azerbaijan, listen, it's always a tough place to go to, Joe. So it is a difficult group. We all expect Portugal will win it. It looks like, you compare this Portuguese squad to the squad that won Euro 2016, it looks a step above that they should be heading to this World Cup potentially as contenders to win it. But it has always felt Ireland, Serbia, it's between one of them. And listen, Serbia have been talking a good game. They've been talking to a good game over the last few days, but they're in a similar position in terms of preparation. They have a new manager, Dragan Stojkovic, has come in and has 2 training sessions. So while he may talk about implementing a very attacking game plan against this old school British style of Ireland, how do you do that when most of your players, his problem is most of his players were playing at the weekend. So probably needed a little bit more of a rest period than Ireland. But I always feel a bit more positive the closer it comes to the game time. It's usually gone within 10 minutes of the game actually starting. But I'm looking at that 11 and thinking, for the injuries that are there, it's not the worst 11 that Ireland will have ever put out. I think there'll be plenty of decent options there. They just need something. They need a bit of luck. In off the arse, doesn't matter.
It's fair to say old Dragon doesn't really fear Irish football, I think.
No. His press conferences so far, Joe, have been really forthright. He's actually been made for great copy for the likes of us who write stuff on websites, because he's basically said that they wouldn't view anything other than a win against Ireland as an acceptable result. Even Dusan Tadic this evening in their press conference saying that the 2-2 draw in Belgrade a couple of years ago, or 5 years ago now at this stage, was the last time the sides met, and that wouldn't be satisfactory this time around. They wouldn't really settle for a point, which, given their recent results, I guess the Scotland one is the one that we'd point to most specifically. Suggest that there can be something taken from an empty Maracana in Belgrade tomorrow night. But El Dragan is doing the flicks and tricks on the training ground. He's saying that draws against the likes of Ireland wouldn't be acceptable, and the games against Luxembourg are actually the most important in the group. So, they're asking for a hiding, for want of a better term, over the course of these couple of games. It's whether or not they're able to implement what he wants them to do on the pitch. I mean, he's talked about changing their style, changing their formation, as Nathan alluded to there, implementing a more attacking style. They might go with 3 up front tomorrow night, Mitrovic and Jovic. He wants to start with, and he may go with Dusan Vlahovic, who's been knocking them in for Fiorentina this season in Serie A. It's whether or not he goes with a 3 and starts to leave holes at the back remains to be seen, because he's left out a lot of defensively minded midfielders. You think of Luka Milivojevic at Crystal Palace, who's probably one of the best in the Premier League at that particular style of play, not invited around this time round. Alex Kolarov, deemed too old. He may give them a phone call if things are going haywire towards the end of the campaign, but they're very much a team themselves in transition, and one that are asking to be caught on the hop tomorrow night.
Well, my favourite quote of his was when he said yesterday that it would be wrong to say that Ireland have no clue. That would be wrong. So I was like, whoa, Dragon, don't flatter us too much here. Go easy. I mean, hey, don't give it all away. No games, of course, then till September. It is this strange schedule as well, Nathan, to accommodate the delayed Euros in the summer. So I guess a little bit like, and Vinnie Perth drew this parallel with Andy Farrell. Andy Farrell now has, to the summer and beyond of positivity because he has signed off in such a great way. So every time Farrell is mentioned in the media or the Irish team come up, we all now glow because of the England performance. It's that lasting taste. That will very much apply to Stephen Kenny. Like, he's had, 2-3 months of, no goal in the last 7 games and losing Duff and losing Alan Kelly and just things not going in the right direction or a lack of momentum. So, again, similar to Farrell, next 6 months, Nathan, can be, wow, what a start. We're in a great place, brilliant. Or it can be, not so good.
That's why these couple of games feel so important, because the autumn was so calamitous. The autumn felt pre-COVID as a bit of a shot to nothing for Stephen Kenny. If you can qualify, brilliant. But if not, you've got a Nations League campaign to build momentum, implement your style, show the world what you have spoken about, a more progressive brand of football. And because of COVID, that didn't happen. It couldn't have gone any worse. Everything that could go wrong did go wrong. So they're not coming into this with any momentum and with very little leeway, it feels. My view on where Stephen Kenny lies at the end of this campaign is always been qualifying for a World Cup is a bonus. Qualifying for a European Championship is a must for any Ireland manager. So I know a lot of people will feel anything less than qualification would mean it's a failure. I think signs of progress, which would be finishing second in the group, which would be playing and earning points against the likes of Portugal and Serbia, would be a sign of progress. You can always get unfortunate and miss out by a goal or two here, or draw a game at home against Serbia that you need to win and you don't finish in the top 2. But he needs some sign of progress over these 4 games, or over these 2 games, and particularly tomorrow night. I think that if it was to go badly wrong tomorrow night, there's no question he's under enormous pressure, rightly or wrongly, going into the game against Luxembourg on Saturday.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. The news round on Off the Ball and News Talk is with thanks to Gillette. We don't just play the game, we change it. Gillette, made of what matters. You're bringing us, Richie, some Stephen Kenny to start off with.
Yeah, the Republic of Ireland manager has confirmed that Mark Travers will start in goal tomorrow night against Serbia. Both Darren Randolph and Caoimhín Kelleher are injured for that World Cup qualifier in Belgrade. The squad has been training this evening at the city's Maracana Stadium ahead of tomorrow night's match, and Kenny was asked about his striking options for that.
We have James Collins again, who's obviously had a good season overall with Luton. I know he's not been in the team in recent weeks, but he's had a good season. And Shane Long is sort of a bit rejuvenated, having gone to Bournemouth and played some consecutive games. So we have options, different types of players. They're sort of different characteristics of strikers. So we have to get the balance right in our attack and play, regardless of who plays there. And obviously Adam has played in a few games. We were sort of blooding him and giving him an opportunity. David McGoldrick was the number 9. James Collins played against Bulgaria. So you're right. There might be opportunities for other options there now. We have to consider that.
It's an interesting one, Nathan, isn't it? I mean, James Collins, listening to Stephen Kenny there, certainly would not be a surprise if he started more of a hold-up player, really, not as adept as David McGoldrick, unfortunately, at it. He has scored 1 goal in his last 19 for Luton. I can't say I'm watching Luton play week in, week out, but that's where he is. Vinnie Perth, I know, and we'll hear later on, was advocating maybe Shane Long for tomorrow night. I know it's a 34-year-old and it's a short-term thing, but that outball over the top, that pace to, put manners on the Serbian defensive line, there's always the chance he'll run onto something a la Germany and nick a goal that way. I know that's not really how Stephen Kenny aspires to play football, but there's definitely an argument for it tomorrow.
Can Aaron Connolly not do that, though? Does Aaron Connolly not have the pace right now of Shane Long? So I understand the argument for Shane Long, but I just feel that Aaron Connolly, if he's fit, can do that exact same job. And we see him do it all the time for Brighton. We see him stretch defences all the time. Yeah, I'm almost I'm like the way Graham Potter, is talking about Aaron Connolly's worrying. I mean, he hasn't played in about 4 weeks. Undercooked, I think, would be a polite way of putting it. So, I don't know. You worry about where Connolly's fitness is. Well, where's Shane Long's fitness? Like, as much as you try and talk optimistically about what could happen, when you listen to Stephen Kenny go through it there, you're right. Like James Collins' goal scoring record isn't good, and he's lost his place in the Luton team. Shane Long, one of the pros that Stephen Kenny went through is he played a couple of consecutive games. But that's about a month ago, that those consecutive games. So there is nobody coming into the squad, with the exception maybe of Seamus Coleman and Kieran Clark, who are coming in with their hand up saying, you have got to pick me because my form is that good. So everybody that we name who could play in that front three, you could probably pick a hole in terms of match fitness, sharpness. Callum Robinson, who I would play Callum Robinson tomorrow night. I think he was brilliant that night against Slovakia. He hasn't played a minute in the last 2 months for West Brom. He's been on the bench for every single match. Even in their desperate need for a goal, Sam Allardyce hasn't looked around and said, Callum, maybe you can do the job for me. So that is the issue, is where does it come from? And I didn't think James Collins played particularly well in the game against Bulgaria. I know it was a bit of a dead rubber at the end of the Nations League at home back in November. He played nearly the whole game, but I didn't think he held the ball up particularly well. I would prefer, if we're going a bit more direct, that you go with Connolly through the middle and maybe play Callum Robinson on one side and potentially Matt Doherty on the other.
Yeah, there's an argument for that. It is a long time now since Callum Robinson scored 2 goals at Stamford Bridge, that's for sure. September, I think, actually. Speaking, Richie, of Seamus Coleman.
Yeah, Kenny wouldn't be drawn on whether or not Seamus Coleman will start tomorrow night. The captain turns 33 later this year and is yet to play a single minute under Kenny. But Coleman isn't thinking about this campaign being his last chance to play at a World Cup.
My frame of mind is I want Ireland to get to the World Cup. My frame of mind is never about my last chance this, my last chance that. I want to play for my country. When that ends. But it's never a case of, this could be my last one. I want a World Cup for the lads that are here, for the fans at home, whether it be the last, second last, whatever the case may be. I don't care. I just want a World Cup for the country. And I've had my time, I've had my Euros, I've had my caps behind me, and I'm not thinking of this could be the last one. And that doesn't enter my mind whatsoever. There's a bigger picture than it being Seamus Coleman's last chance at a World Cup, definitely.
Now, John Delaney and the High Court, Rich.
Yeah, the High Court has refused John Delaney's application to exclude the media from a hearing to determine whether legal privilege exists in relation to certain emails. Emails belonging to the former chief executive of the FAI were seized as part of an investigation into the association. And our courts correspondent Frank Rainey has more.
Last year, more than 250,000 files were seized by Gardaí working with the Office of the Director of Corporate Enforcement as part of their investigation into the FAI. John Delaney is claiming legal privilege over thousands of seized emails. The court will have to decide whether that privilege exists. If it does, then the details contained within won't be allowed to enter the public domain. With that in mind, his lawyers applied for the hearing to be held in private. Ms Justice Leonie Reynolds previously said that justice has to be open and transparent. Today she said it seemed to her that if there's a question mark over a document, then that can be flagged in advance so as not to compromise it. As such, she refused Mr Delaney's application for an in-camera hearing, but said it could be reviewed again at a later date. Frank Rainey at the High Court.
On the Serbian manager and his confidence, Paul says, lads, if the Irish rugby team was playing the Serbian rugby team, we wouldn't be exactly talking them up. Look, they're better than us. They know they're better than us. We know they're better than us. And Serbia will be expecting to put 2 or 3 past us, says Paul. God, I hope the gap isn't as big between the Serbian rugby team and the Irish rugby team as us and their football team.
I think you're right, Joe, that when you look on paper, yes, the Serbians are well ahead of Ireland, and you look at the level their players are playing at and delivering at and playing week in, week out, yes, all of that is in their favour. But they have massively underachieved consistently, campaign after campaign after campaign. They have a new manager who's had a couple of training sessions, so it's not that straightforward. Yes, they will expect to win this game. They should expect to win this game on home soil. But at some stage, they need to actually back up all the talk and do it.
Yeah. Weirdly, they're better in World Cup qualification than Euros, which is odd. Eamon in Kildare says, Stephen Kenny's right, lads. We do have different types of players. We have tall ones who don't score. We have short ones who don't score. We have left and right-footed ones who don't score as well. There's no shortage of different types. There you go, Nathan. Cullen.
There's no VAR tomorrow night, is there? Just worried we'll finally get a goal and then it'll just disappear.
Josh Cullen says Paul and Cork has to start tomorrow night. By far the best option to set the tempo and keep the ball away from the power in the Serbian midfield. I guess in some ways that is the $1 million question, Nathan. As opposed to backs to the wall, Richard Dunn in Moscow type performance from this Irish team, it would just be great if they could take the sting out of things by, dominating possession for 5-10 minute periods here and there, as opposed to, right, you have the ball, we're sitting back, come at us.
And that's it, isn't it? It is those 5-10 minute periods where you can just actually relax for a minute and hold on to possession, because quite often I think people think progressive possession-based football is a 90-minute thing, that you're going to be Manchester City, which they're not. It's when you get a chance to do the right thing that you do it. There will be times tomorrow night where Ireland will be sitting back. We may see Matt Doherty, if he's on the right wing, doubling up with Seamus Coleman defensively. That's okay. You're away from home. It's when Seamus Coleman wins the ball back. Does he fire it long towards James Collins over the top and it goes too far and slips off the surface and is back with the keeper? Or does he knock a little ball into Josh Cullen, who knocks it back to the centre half, and they play it around a bit and just regroup, calm down and try and slowly build it forward, which they did at times really well against Slovakia. There were times, was James McCarthy and Shane Duffy say, who didn't look like they were on the same wavelength, but they picked their moments to hold on to the ball and pick the moments to inject a bit of pace on it. And Cullen is probably the only one at the moment who can play that number 6 role, if it is one number 6 and 2 number 8s. I don't think he would throw Malumbi in there. But again, he has options. I think Hendrick will play because of his experience. I wouldn't be surprised if it was Cullen, Hendrick, and maybe one of Knight or Malumbi in there.
Rich, interesting news on the Lions then. They're going.
Yeah, this summer's Lions tour to South Africa is going to go ahead as planned. An 8-match tour will begin against the Stormers in Cape Town on July the 3rd. The Lions are due to play 3 tests against the World Cup winning Springboks starting on July 24th. It's believed a contingency plan of playing on home soil was cost prohibitive, and it's not yet known whether fans will be allowed to attend the games in South Africa or if indeed overseas fans will be permitted to enter the country. The programme for the Women's Six Nations has finally been revealed. Each team has 2 pool fixtures with the corresponding placings in each pool playing each other over the 3rd weekend. Ireland face Wales at the Arms Park in Cardiff on April 10th before hosting France in Donnybrook a week later. Head coach Adam Griggs has named a 35-person squad for the competition. It includes the uncapped quintet of Amy Lee Murphy-Crowe, Stacey Flood, Eve Higgins, Emily Lane and Grace Moore.
Very good. On the Lions thing, Nathan, interesting. It had seemed like the home Six Nations was very much the front runner. I mean, I think this is a much better solution, bar postponing it for a year and doing it properly next year, which didn't seem to be possible given all the tours which are already planned for next year. This seems preferable. I mean, there were absolutely no guarantees really that over the summer you'd have huge crowds back and a brilliant atmosphere for, Lions matches in Dublin or in London or wherever. Look, it's not ideal going to South Africa and playing behind empty stadiums, but I still think it's preferable to the home idea, the home tour. I didn't like that at all, to be honest.
No, I think they feel that the money needs to come in, though, so it had to happen one way or another. And there was obviously issues around different variants and whether they could travel to South Africa. I think at this stage, it doesn't matter where it happens. The players are going to be stuck in a hotel for 6 weeks. They're not going to leave except to go training, except to go to the matches. So maybe from a financial point of view, there's actually very little difference in terms of health and safety, in terms of protecting the players between having it in the UK or having it in South Africa. And maybe the right thing to do in that case is to just have it in South Africa. But it's a tough time to be a rugby player. I know nobody has any sympathy for them at all. They're very privileged position and all that. But like, they're down in Carton House, an empty Carton House for 4 or 5 weeks, no access to their family quite often, may get out for a day. If you're being picked on that Lions tour, I'm sure there's going to be any amount of protocols that you're basically disappearing for 2 months. Nobody's going to be allowed to travel. Listen, I know people are going through far tougher, but it's not what you dream about when you dream about playing for the Lions.
No, I think it's fair. Everyone understands you're talking in relative terms, because the 09 tour seemed to be such a vibrant tour, and they got out and about and they threw themselves into the whole thing, and it was great fun. Whereas, as you just said there, 6 weeks stuck in a hotel, I mean, that will get at you, especially if you're like, no chance of starting and on the fringes of the midweek side. I mean, you'll go balubas.
Oh, I'd be picking Johnny on a regular basis, I think.
Yeah. Johnny, you're on the midweek substitute bench again today, but I just want you to be a good presence around the hotel, okay?
Yeah.
Bundi Aki then?
Banned for 4 matches following his red card in Saturday's Six Nations win over England. The Connacht centre dismissed for a high challenge on Billy Vunipola 17 minutes from the end of that game. Aki conceded his tackle was inches too high and a 6-week ban was imposed. 2 weeks were chalked off due to his previous disciplinary record. It means Aki will definitely miss Connacht's Challenge Cup last 16 trip to Leicester and the quarter-final should they qualify. Just under 3 months after being appointed, Kieran Campbell is to leave his role as Ireland under-20 head coach. The former scrum half is leaving his position at Ulster in the summer and is bound for the English Championship side Ealing Trailfinders. And tributes have been paid to Maverick ex-England striker Frank Worthington, who's died at the age of 72. The former Bolton, Huddersfield and Leicester man had battled Alzheimer's in recent years. Worthington was perhaps equally as famous for his off-field exploits as for those on it, and once failed a medical at Liverpool with a deal agreed. In a nomadic career, he also played in Sweden, the United States and at Galway United. He only won 8 international caps, though scoring twice, and his former Bolton teammate Sam Allardyce feels Worthington deserved more England recognition.
Because of that flamboyant character. I think if the England managers would have actually had him in the squad more often, they'd realise that he was a man that just wanted to play football at the highest level and play football for as long as he possibly can.
Yeah, you forget Big Sam was England manager sometimes, don't you?
For that game.
Short and sweet.
Yeah. I always
Frank was
remember,
amazing though.
Owen Sheehan, that brilliant tweet after he got stung by, was it the News of the World or whoever it was?
Telegraph.
And it was Telegraph. He was like, that's the last time Big Sam ever speaks to someone with a GoPro on their head. Which was good. I don't, am I wrong here to not really remember Frank Worthington?
He's before your time. He's before your time. He was still knocking around. I mentioned this earlier on Twitter. He was still knocking around the football magazines when I first started reading them around 89, 90. And even in magazines that were ostensibly aimed at kids, you know, at the time and maybe slightly older, he was just then portrayed as a ladies' man. And there was no mistaking that Frank Worthington was somebody who was known for, quote unquote, how many women he'd bedded, as opposed to how many goals he'd scored on the pitch, which were plentiful. He scored over 270 goals during his career. He was quite the player, and that goal that's done the rounds today, playing for Bolton against Ipswich, where he has his back to goal, he flicks it over the defenders and finishes with his left foot, was pretty much encapsulating everything that was good about Frank Worthington on the pitch. But like, if you go searching Google Images today, you will not find, and I beg anybody to do this once the show's over, you won't find a bad image of Frank Worthington. He was just a personality bigger than the game. He was somebody who absolutely enjoyed every inch of his life. And just a fantastic character around the game, and the kind of person that they really, really don't make anymore in the football in its modern variant doesn't allow. But Jesus, what a legacy he's left behind him. It's just such a pity that his last few years were so difficult for him and his family.
Rory McIlroy then.
Starting to work with renowned swing coach Pete Cowan in a bid to rediscover his form. The former world #1 golfer has fallen to 11th in the rankings and hasn't won a tournament since 2019. After missing the cut at the Players' Championship earlier this month, McIlroy admitted he'd been chasing hitting the ball further at the cost of consistency. Interesting,
Nathan. Very interesting.
I've incredible insight to give on this, Joe, but I'd get on to otbsports.com/golf weekly and pay her $3.99 a month if you want it. It's very interesting because Pete Cowan's name has always been thrown out there around McIlroy. There was always a sense that maybe he was too technical for McIlroy's easy genius, but Rory's obviously had major technical issues that he has delved into over the last few weeks. So it feels like it's a very good move for McIlroy, and Pete Cowan has done some brilliant work with Brooks Koepka over the last few years, who might be seen as similar type of character to McIlroy. So it's hard to see how it can't work.
Like, he's renowned as a short game genius. I mean, genius is genuinely the word if you talk to people within golf when it comes to Pete Cowan, but he can coach the long game as well, very well by all accounts. I mean, 6 players working with him at the time, as opposed to, you know, he coached a player who went on to win a major at another stage. There were 6 players who won majors while he was their coach. Darren Clark, there was Westhuizen, there was Danny Willett, there was Graham McDowell, Brooks, as you mentioned, and Henrik Stenson. I mean, you think how well Henrik Stenson was playing at his best under Cowan. And then everybody from Harrington has sought him out. Lee Westwood, Sergio Garcia, Schwartzel, Matt Fitzpatrick now. So, I mean, highly rated to say the least. It does feel like McIlroy's going down a bit of a curving path, to put it that way. I mean, it was so simple for so long, wasn't it? That swing where it was me and Michael Bannon. He's known me since I was 6 and we just do our thing. And generally the short game is the issue, never the long game. It's kind of amazing he finds himself here 7 years on since his last major.
Well, it'll be interesting to see what path Pete Cowan brings him down, because Pete Cowan was reading, talking about Louis Westhuizen and Westhuizen's victory at the Open, and what he loved about Westhuizen is that he just accepted his swing, how beautiful it was, and never tried to overthink it, and never tried to get too into the technical side of it, and just went with it, and it worked for him. So does he get McIlroy quickly back to that? Because he can go and spend weeks and months, I'm sure, changing things for McIlroy. But also, look at what he did with Darren Clarke, where Darren Clarke's career was in the scrap heap. The week he turned up to the Open, nothing was happening. And Pete Cowan looks at him for 15 minutes, makes one change, and suddenly Darren Clarke feels good about life again. So there's quick fixes, there's the long-term fix. McIlroy feels a fortnight out from the Masters. Just needs a quick fix.
Well, maybe that's it, isn't it? Mick says this McIlroy chasing distance thing might be one of the dumbest things I've heard in a long time. It can't be true. He's already longer than just about anyone on tour. Was he bored on a Monday when he decided to copy Bryson? Yeah, largely was of the same opinion, really, when you think, McIlroy mentioned the US Open as being the trigger moment for him, but for McIlroy, it's about Augusta, and US Open setup is not an Augusta setup. And it was so apparent, I think, to everybody, his wedge game, his short game was the issue at Augusta. So why he thought he needed an extra 10 yards, I don't know. What difference would that make? 140 yards to a pin versus 130. That was not his issue. So we'll see. It is interesting. Rich, do you want to give us the last story?
Real Madrid handed a boost ahead of next month's Champions League quarter-final with Liverpool. Their home leg will be played in the Spanish capital after the government there agreed to lift the ban on UK flights from March the 30th. Real will host Liverpool at the Estadio Alfredo Di Stefano in Madrid on April the 6th. The Bernabeu currently undergoing renovations, of course. That ruling also means Manchester United will travel to Spain for their Europa League game with Granada the same week.
Okay, very good. So we've Danny Murphy on the way between 9 and 10. Really good chat with him. Very smart, tactically astute, interesting fella. Played with some brilliant players and had a great career. That's a really good one coming your way between 9 and 10. Crappy quiz in the middle hour. We've got Gary Breen and Vinnie Perth coming up. And Nathan, I know on Golf Weekly this afternoon you had David Livingston, Sky Sports presenter extraordinaire down the years on. Was he good?
Oh, it was great. Just talk, David, please. And I'm brought back to my couch on a Sunday night, glass of wine, feeling good about life. He just has that. He was the face and the voice of golf for so many years, and a lot of good stories. And I did remind him of that time he gate crashed his leaving do at the Golf Nacional as well.
What did he say?
Well, he said he can't even watch it back. He was almost getting emotional as I reminded him of this is what I want when I leave off the ball. It was the most expensively assembled leaving video I have ever seen. It must have had every member of the world's top 20 paying tribute to David Livingston. All the staff he's worked with for years in tears paying tribute to him. And me and you stuck there somehow in the corner going, please don't look at us. Please don't look at us.
It's a long story.
He was delighted. He was delighted we were there, though.
Was he? Suffice to say, we shouldn't have been. Paul McGinley said, "Oh, come in. It's just a casual thing," because we was at the Ryder Cup, and it turned out it was not a casual thing. It was very private.
Family and close friends, and the two of us.
Right. So we're done for the Newsround this evening. Richie, thank you.
Cheers, lads.
Cheers, lads.
Thanks, Nathan. Like I said, Danny Murphy on the way at 9. Coming up, we've got Vinnie Perth and Gary Breen previewing Ireland-Serbia tomorrow.
The Newsround on Off the Ball.
With Gillette. We don't just play the game, we change it. Gillette. Made of what matters. Shh. Listen.